It's been 6 months since everything officially ended, and I still wake up some nights with my heart pounding, wondering if I'm the kind of person who slams a door in someone's face when they genuinely need it open. Or if I'm the kind of person who finally learned the hard way that not everyone who cries in your arms is crying for the same reason you think they are. Either way, I don't know what to do anymore. So I'm writing here. To make any sense of how I got to this point, I have to go back, not all the way through the worst parts, not yet, but far enough to explain how the ground beneath my family's feet started cracking long before we realized we were standing on a fault line. 5 years ago, my dad, Mark, died from an undetected thoracic artery rupture. I still hate typing those words. It feels like I'm flattening the most traumatic day of our lives into a clinical sentence, like the phrasing can't possibly hold the weight of what actually happened. 1 minute he was alive, joking with my mom about her terrible coffee beans, and the next he was collapsing in our living room, pale and gasping. The ambulance came fast, but not fast enough to undo the mistakes the earlier doctor had made, the doctor who brushed off his symptoms and sent him home. If grief were just sadness, maybe we could have healed faster. But this was different. Someone should have caught this. This didn't have to happen. This was the kind of wrongness that doesn't let you sleep, that makes you replay moments over and over until they lose shape. My mom, Evelyn, felt it the worst. I watched her age 10 years in those first 10 days. We eventually pursued a malpractice claim. Not because we wanted money. Trust me when I say there is no amount of money that feels like compensation for your father dying on the floor of your own home, but because the alternative was pretending nothing preventable had happened. The entire process took almost 2 years. Meetings, experts, reconstructed timelines, arguments about medical standards, depositions where we had to describe in detail every moment from the first chest pain to the final phone call. I don't think I've ever hated humanity more than when I listened to professionals debate whether my father's life was worth the number attached to the settlement offer. But we kept going. And 3 years ago, the case finally settled. A multimillion-dollar settlement that felt less like a win and more like an exhausted, ragged exhale from the universe. Something like, here, take this and try to rebuild your lives. We used part of it for necessities. My mom paid off the house. My sister June paid her student loans. I got a therapist who specialized in grief. But most of it just sat in accounts, untouched. It felt radioactive. Anytime one of us even mentioned it, the room went quiet in the strangest way. Life was not normal, but scarred in, healed over. June was finishing grad school. I had finally stopped flinching when the phone rang unexpectedly. Mom gardened obsessively. We talked about Dad almost every day, but we could do it without both breaking down. It felt like we were learning how to carry him forward instead of dragging him behind us. And then one night, June texted me. Call me ASAP. Something weird happened. When I called, she sounded like she'd been sitting in silence for a long time. Claire, she said, my 23andMe results updated. It says I have a half-sister. I thought she was joking at first. Or misreading. Or the site glitched. We'd both done 23andMe around the same time. Mostly for fun. Mostly because June is obsessed with ancestry charts. I'd gotten some boring results and forgotten all about it. June wasn't laughing. It's not a cousin, she said. It literally says half-sister. And she messaged me. She read the message aloud. The name was Ava. The tone was painfully polite, almost apologetic. Hi, I know this is strange, but 23andMe shows we might be close matches. I've grown up not knowing anything about my father. I'm not asking for money or anything. I just want to understand where I come from. If you'd be open to talking, I would be grateful. My first response wasn't anger. It wasn't denial. It was something closer to dread. Because the math made sense. Dad wasn't a saint. He was human. And 5 years before he married my mom, they had broken up for almost a year. I'd heard vague pieces of that story before. They were young, dramatic, stubborn. They split. They dated other people. They inevitably found their way back to each other. But still, the idea that he might have a child out there, a child who reached out now, not earlier, felt like a ghost knocking at the door. What are we supposed to do? June whispered. I didn't know. We talked to our mom the next day. She didn't faint, but she did sit down very carefully, the way people do when their legs stop trusting them. I always wondered if something like this would surface, she said in a small voice. When we got back together, I asked him if there was anything from that time I should know. He said no. He said it was over and done. She closed her eyes. I believed him. We debated. Was it a scam? Was the DNA match real? Was Ava lying? Was Dad lying? All those years ago? Nothing felt solid. But in the end, my mom said the thing that guided everything afterward. If she's real, she didn't choose the circumstances of her birth any more than you did. So we replied to Ava. We agreed to meet her in a cafe halfway between our places. I barely slept the night before. I kept imagining seeing a stranger who looked like me, or like June, or, God, the possibility crushed me, like Dad. When we walked in, she was already sitting at a table against the wall, twisting a napkin in her hands. She stood the second she saw us. I recognized something immediately, something small, subtle, but unmistakable. She had Dad's nose. Not exactly, but enough that my breath hitched. Hi, she said, smiling nervously. I'm Ava. We introduced ourselves. We sat. We ordered drinks we barely touched. The whole thing felt surreal, like we were characters in a documentary about family secrets. Ava told us about growing up with a mother who never talked about her father. She said she'd been given a single first name, Matt, and nothing else. No pictures, no stories, nothing to build any sense of identity on. She said she'd spent years feeling like she was walking around with a blank space where half her life should be. When she found the 23andMe match, she said she cried for 2 hours. She apologized again. She apologized a lot. For messaging us, for possibly opening wounds, for not knowing how to ask questions without sounding needy. She said she didn't want money. She said she wasn't trying to claim anything. I just want to know who I am, she said, eyes shining. June cried first. I held it together until Ava pulled out a printed copy of the DNA comparison and pushed it across the table like it was something sacred. We talked for nearly 3 hours. And by the end, it felt wrong to just shake hands and walk away. When Ava hesitantly asked if we'd ever consider showing her pictures of our dad, I found myself saying, maybe next weekend you could come to our grandmother's house. That's where the albums are. Are you sure? She asked, like she was scared to even hope. I wasn't sure, but I nodded. And she looked like someone had handed her a missing piece of herself. I didn't sleep much the night before Ava came to our grandmother's house. Part of it was nerves, but part of it was this low, aching fear that we were making a mistake we wouldn't recognize until it was too late. I kept imagining my dad's face if he were somehow watching all this unfold, what he'd think of us opening the door to this stranger who might be his daughter. Would he be proud of us for being compassionate? Horrified that his past was reaching into our present? Relieved? Ashamed? I didn't know. I still don't. Our grandmother, Margaret, lives in the same house she's been in for over 50 years, a narrow 2-story place with creaky floors, a tiny backyard garden, and shelves lined with framed photos that haven't been dusted since the early 2000s. It smells like lemon polish and faded upholstery, and stepping inside always feels like being dropped straight into childhood. It's the one place where I can still picture my dad sitting on the couch, one arm slung across the backrest, calling us kiddo, and pretending the TV remote was a microphone. When we told her about Ava, Gran was skeptical in the way only old women with very sharp memories can be. A test on the internet told her that, she asked. And you trust that? It's not just the test, I said. It's the shared DNA. The percentage lines up exactly with a half-sibling. Gran narrowed her eyes. And what does this girl want, exactly? Her tone wasn't unkind. It was protective. The Delaney women close ranks when threatened. Always have, always will. She said she doesn't want anything except information, I told her. And she was really emotional meeting us. She cried seeing the picture of Dad on June's lock screen. Gran frowned, but the edge softened. Well, if she's hurting, then I suppose we won't turn her away. That was how we ended up standing on the porch that Saturday morning, me, June, and Gran, waiting for Ava to arrive. When Ava's car pulled up, she stepped out looking like she'd been holding her breath the entire drive. She wore a soft burgundy sweater and carried a small tote bag. She hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps until June waved her up. Hi, Ava said, and even though she'd already hugged us at the cafe, her voice still shook like she wasn't sure she was welcome. June hugged her again immediately. I followed, a little more cautiously this time, not because I didn't trust her yet, but because the weight of what we were doing finally settled on me. Hugging someone in a cafe is one thing. Inviting them into a home filled with memories of your father is something else entirely. Gran hugged her too. A stiff, polite hug, but a hug nonetheless. Come in, she said. I brewed tea. Not that herbal nonsense, real tea. Ava laughed nervously, and somehow that made Gran warm to her a bit more. We sat in the living room while Gran brought out a tray with tea and mismatched cups. Ava didn't touch hers at first. Her eyes roamed the room, stopping on every photograph. I could see her trying to swallow the emotion rising in her throat. Is that him? She asked quietly, pointing to a large framed picture of my dad from when he was in his 20s. Dark hair. Lopsided smile. The kind of man who looked like he had no idea someone would one day look at that photo searching for themselves. Yes, I said. Ava stood and walked closer. She reached up as if she wanted to touch the glass, but stopped just short. He looks kind. He was, June said. He really was. Ava nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. It's so strange, she whispered. I don't know him, but I feel like I miss him. Those words hit something in me I wasn't expecting. I felt my own eyes sting. It was too raw, too vulnerable, too immediate. I think that was the moment I let myself believe she might actually be our sister, not just biologically, but emotionally connected in a way strangers aren't. After tea, Grant suggested we bring out the photo albums. We went to the upstairs closet, where she keeps the big plastic tubs labeled with masking tape and fading marker, photos 1980 to 1999, vacations, holidays, kids. Ava helped carry them down. Her hands trembled each time she set one on the coffee table. We opened the first album. There was Dad on a beach, holding a bright red kite. Then Dad at a campsite, forehead smudged with charcoal because he'd refused to let anyone else tend the fire. Dad in a hideous Christmas sweater with blinking lights, grinning while Mom tried to pull it off him. Ava laughed at the pictures, small bursts of air, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to find joy in them. And then she started asking questions. What was he like in the morning? Was he grumpy? Did he tell dumb jokes? Was he strict with you? Or soft? Did he sing along to the radio? Some of the questions were normal, sweet even. But then there were others. What age was he in these pictures? When exactly did you move to this house? Did he work at the same job the whole time? What year did that happen again? At the time, I didn't see anything strange about it. She was filling in blanks, trying to create a timeline for a life she'd been cut off from. But looking back, certain questions feel different. Too specific. Too oriented around dates. At one point, Gran left the room and returned with something wrapped carefully in tissue paper. She unfolded it and handed it to Ava. It was the pillow. We'd had it made after Dad died. A simple white throw pillow with his photo printed on the front. Not fancy. Not artistic. Just comforting. It lived on the guest bed in the room where he used to nap on holidays. Ava froze when she saw it. Her breath hitched. She clutched the pillow against her chest like she was hugging a person. And then she started crying. Not loud or dramatic. Quiet. Shaking sobs that made my own throat tighten. I'm sorry, she gasped. This is overwhelming. I've never seen him before. Not even a picture. And he looks like someone I could have loved. Gran put a hand on her shoulder. It startled me. Gran is gentle but not typically physically affectionate. It's all right, child, she said. You cry if you need to. June was crying too. I tried not to. I failed. We spent hours going through the albums. By late afternoon, Ava was emotionally exhausted. She sat curled into the corner of the couch, still clutching the pillow. Gran insisted she stay for dinner. After dinner, Gran insisted she stay the night because it's too late to be driving around exhausted in that tiny car. Ava stayed in the guest room. June and I shared the room across the hall like we used to when we were little. We brushed our teeth side by side, whispering about how surreal this all was. I like her, June whispered. I didn't think I would, but I do. Don't you? I hesitated. I think I do, I admitted. She seems lost. And grateful. She's not pushy. She's not weird. She just seems like she wants to belong somewhere. June nodded vigorously. Exactly. But later that night, as I walked past the guest room to get water, I heard quiet crying again. Ava was sobbing into the pillow, Dad's pillow, trying to muffle the sound. It broke something open in me. I leaned against the wall for a long time, listening, trying to process the grief of someone who was grieving a father she never even knew. The next morning, Ava thanked us about 20 times before leaving. She hugged Gran. She hugged June. She hugged me last tightly, like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go too soon. Thank you, she whispered, for letting me see him. I told her it was okay, that it wasn't a burden, that we were glad she came. I meant it. A few weeks passed after that, and things were good. Oddly good. Ava would text June to ask about Dad's favorite authors or TV shows. She'd send me messages asking if he'd liked coffee or tea, or whether he'd been the type to keep old notes in his pockets. She wasn't intrusive, if anything. She seemed terrified of overstepping. She always apologized if she asked too much. Sometimes she'd disappear for a day or two, then send a message saying, "Sorry, I wasn't trying to ghost you. I just get overwhelmed." We had brunch together twice. Ava showed us pictures from her childhood, tiny snapshots that looked strangely empty because there was no father in any of them. No male presence at all. Just her mother, and a rotating cast of nannies and neighbors. But every now and then, she'd ask something that didn't quite fit. What year did the hospital make that mistake with your dad? How long after his death did the malpractice process start? How did you know you had a case? Did they tell you anything about deadlines? She never asked these questions all at once. But over time they added up. And back then, I didn't see the pattern forming. I just thought she was trying to understand the story of a man she'd been denied. But now, 6 months after everything collapsed, I can remember the exact tone she used on one particular question, one that I keep replaying in my head. "Do you remember exactly when the settlement was finalized?" She'd said it so casually, so innocently, so gently. And I answered her. I answered her without hesitation. That's something I can't forgive myself for. If the first few months with Ava felt like the opening of a door, then the months that followed felt like walking through a hallway that slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly narrowed around us. I didn't see the walls closing in at the time. I don't think any of us did. It was only later, much, much later, when I looked back at certain moments and realized they weren't coincidences or quirks or innocent questions. They were pieces of something bigger that we never imagined could be forming. After that weekend at Gran's house, things settled into a strange but warm rhythm. Ava would check in periodically, never too much, always with that gentle hesitancy that made us feel like she was afraid of taking up space she didn't deserve. She came to brunch a few times. She met my mom once, and it went better than I expected. Mom was polite, restrained, soft around the edges the way she gets when she's trying not to cry. Ava seemed nervous but deeply grateful, and for a brief moment I thought, maybe this can work. Maybe we can make room for her. There were days it felt almost too easy, like we were slipping into some kind of alternate universe where our father had lived long enough to introduce us properly. Ava would laugh at something June said, and she'd throw her head back in the same way Dad used to. Sometimes I'd catch her from the right angle and see the same tired lines around the eyes, the same shadow of a dimple when she smiled. It was surreal and comforting and painful all at once. But alongside the softness, little things started happening. Small shifts. Not big enough to sound alarm bells on their own, but enough that, looking back, they form a trail I wish I'd followed sooner. The first shift was her communication pattern. At first, she was consistent, checking in every few days, sending a link to a book Dad had loved, or a photo of a recipe she was trying to copy from one of Gran's notes. But then she started disappearing. A few days at a time, then a week. The first time she vanished for 10 days, June sent her a worried message. Ava replied with a long apology. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to ghost you. It's just, sometimes this is a lot, emotionally. I hope you're not mad." We weren't mad. If anything, it made us sympathetic. We knew grief came in waves. We knew identity could feel like shifting sand. So we reassured her. It's okay, June wrote. We're here when you're ready. But after that, the absences grew more frequent. And when she came back, she asked more questions, carefully worded, gently phrased, but increasingly specific. What exactly did the hospital say that first night? Do you remember the timeline of when the doctors saw him versus when he collapsed? What did your lawyer say about what counted as negligence? How long did it take for the case to settle? When did the settlement money actually reach your accounts? At the time, these questions didn't set off alarms. We interpreted them through the lens of emotion, not intention. I thought she was trying to understand the circumstances of her father's death. I thought she was processing trauma she never got to witness. I thought she was grieving the decade of stories she'd been excluded from. I didn't realize she was building something out of those answers. The second shift was in her demeanor. At first, Ava seemed humbled, almost too humbled, by the idea of being part of our lives. She'd apologize if she spoke too long, if she texted past 9, if she asked for a photo. But then, every so often, she'd make a comment that felt off. One time, June invited her to a small family get-together. Nothing major, just dinner at Mom's. Ava declined, saying she had plans. But then she added, "It must be nice having a family that actually wants you." June felt awful after reading that. So did I. We interpreted it as a glimpse of a lifetime of insecurity. Maybe it was. Maybe it was sincere. But looking back, I can see how she was beginning to position herself, not just emotionally, but socially, in a way that made certain future actions feel justified. Another time, she made a joke along the lines of, "I guess I inherited all the bad medical luck from Dad, huh?" When she saw the look on my face, she immediately backtracked. "I'm sorry, that was a bad joke. I didn't mean that." We brushed it off. But small cracks were forming. Cracks we didn't examine because examining them would have required questioning the foundation. The third shift was the most subtle but, in hindsight, the most telling. Ava's sudden interest in legal timelines. It started with a question during brunch one day. "Do you remember how long after his passing you filed the malpractice case?" she asked, stirring her coffee with unnecessary focus. I didn't think twice. I told her it was fairly soon afterward, maybe a few months, because the lawyer told us timing mattered. Ava nodded but didn't comment. A week later, she asked another question. "Do you know if there were deadlines about who could file claims? Like, is that kind of thing limited to immediate family?" I joked, stupidly naively, that she should have been a lawyer with all the curiosity she had. She laughed, but her laugh sounded too light, too airy, like she was covering something. June didn't pick up on it. Mom didn't either. But I remember feeling a flicker in my stomach. Something quick. Something I ignored. And then, almost abruptly, Ava grew distant. She stopped texting as often. She canceled dinner plans twice. She said she needed space to think. I assumed it was emotional overload. I assumed she was processing the reality that her biological father was gone, and the family she might have wanted to know existed without her for decades. I assumed kindness where I should have assumed caution. Then came the day everything cracked open. It was a Wednesday afternoon, maybe around 3. I was working from home when there was a knock on the door. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting anyone, but the pounding continued. When I opened it, a man in a delivery uniform handed me a large envelope. "For Claire Delaney," he said. "Signature required." My stomach lurched. I didn't know why. Just instinct. I signed. I closed the door. I stared at the envelope for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a stack of legal papers. The words blurred at first. I thought I was misunderstanding them. I thought this was a mix-up, a clerical error, something meant for someone else. But then I saw Ava's name. Ava Rowan. Plaintiff. And beneath it, Claire Delaney, June Delaney, and Evelyn Delaney defendants. She was suing us. She was suing us for a share of the malpractice settlement from 3 years ago. My hands went numb. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the floor had tilted beneath me, like gravity itself shifted direction. I don't remember dropping the papers, but they hit the floor. Loudly. I stood there shaking, staring at words I couldn't reconcile with the girl who had cried over my dad's photo and slept under my grandmother's roof. I called June. She answered on the first ring. "June," I whispered, "did you get something delivered?" She inhaled sharply. I heard paper rustling. "Oh my God," she said. "Claire, what is this? What is this?" She was crying. Fast, panicked breaths. I could hear Mom in the background asking what was wrong. I told them both to come to my place. When they arrived, we sat on my living room floor, surrounded by legal papers that laid out Ava's claim. She was the biological daughter of Mark Delaney. The hospital's negligence harmed her by depriving her of a parent. She was legally entitled to a share of the settlement funds. We had wrongfully kept her from her rightful inheritance. She wanted money. She wanted our father's death quantified again. She wanted a piece of something we earned through agony. Mom crumpled. She sank to the floor and covered her face. June screamed, actually screamed, and tore one of the papers in half. I felt nothing at first. Just a numbness. Like my brain refused to catch up to what was happening. It wasn't until hours later, when everyone had left and I was alone with the echo of devastation, that it hit me all at once. The questions. The dates. The legal curiosity. The timing. The sudden distance. The absences. The precise, detail-oriented conversations about Dad's death. She hadn't just been filling in the holes of her own story. She had been preparing. Preparing to do this. And the worst part? Everything I'd told her, every date, every timeline, every detail, was now quoted in the lawsuit as supporting evidence for her claim. Everything she cried about. Everything she hugged us through. Everything she held so delicately. It all felt like a setup. A slow, careful gathering of information she needed to hurt us. That night, I sat in the dark, shaking, staring at my phone. I opened old messages from her, looking for clues, and suddenly I saw meaning where I hadn't before. "Do you remember exactly when the settlement finalized? Did your lawyer ever talk about deadlines for claims? Would it have changed anything if someone else filed something later?" She'd asked that last one casually, like it was nothing. I'd laughed. I'd answered. I'd trusted her. And now, she was using my own words to take the most painful thing in our lives and turn it into a legal battleground. I didn't cry that night. I didn't even scream. I just sat there, numb, feeling the slow, cold understanding that nothing, absolutely nothing, about the past few months had been what I thought. I used to think there were limits to how much a single event could hurt a family. Dad's death had already dug a canyon through our lives, and the malpractice case had carved it even deeper. I thought we had already survived the worst thing that could happen to us. I was wrong. The year that followed Ava's lawsuit filing wasn't just painful, it was corrosive. It ate away at every part of us. Our memories, our security, our trust, our ability to look at the past without flinching. I don't say this lightly, but there were days during that year when I wished Ava had never existed. And then I felt guilty for thinking that, because she didn't choose to be born. She didn't choose her circumstances. But she did choose this path. She chose to tear us open again. And she chose to do it in a way that made us doubt every warm moment we had shared with her. We hired Andrew Kessler, the same attorney who had represented us in the malpractice case 3 years earlier. He remembered us. He remembered Dad. He remembered how hard that process was for us. When we walked into his office carrying the lawsuit papers, he looked genuinely sorry. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," he said, "but with the rise of consumer DNA testing, I'm seeing more of these cases every year." Mom winced. June's jaw clenched. She cried over my father's picture. Mom said quietly, voice cracking, "She slept in my mother's house. She said she wasn't here for money." Andrew nodded, but gently. "People can say things that feel true to them in the moment," he said. "But once they learn the legal implications of biological relationships, everything changes." He flipped through the lawsuit slowly, methodically. "Her argument hinges on 2 things," he explained. "Proving biological connection, which the DNA test supports, and arguing that she suffered loss due to the negligence that caused your father's death." "But she never even knew him," June snapped. "How can you suffer loss from someone you never met?" Andrew sighed. "Legally, arguments like that are complicated. Emotionally, people convince themselves of anything. Then he said the sentence that shaped our entire year. The strongest defense you have is that she filed her claim too late after your father's death. Mom closed her eyes like someone had punched her. So this still goes to court? I asked. Yes, Andrew said. It still becomes a full case. And just like that, the floor opened beneath us. You know what the most surreal part was? Ava didn't reach out to us. Not once. Not before filing, not after filing, not ever during the entire year. No explanation. No apology. No, I hope you understand. No, I'm sorry this hurts. Nothing. Everything, every single thing went through lawyers. It was like she'd cut out the emotional core of herself and replaced it with legal strategy. Like the girl who cried over Dad's pillow wasn't the same woman who had now entered this battle. June tried at first to make excuses. Maybe her lawyer told her not to contact us, she said. Maybe she didn't know how to talk to us about it. Maybe she's scared. Mom didn't respond to those attempts. Mom stopped saying Ava's name entirely. I wasn't as generous as June. She asked about deadlines for claims. I reminded her. She asked when the settlement finalized. You think she asked those things out of grief? June cried at that. She cried a lot during that year. So did Mom. I cried less, but I cracked in quieter ways. If you've never been deposed, the best way I can describe it is this. You relive the worst moments of your life while strangers write them down and analyze your trauma like it's a math problem. We were questioned separately. How did you feel when your father died? What financial losses did your family suffer? When did you first become aware of potential negligence? When did settlement funds become accessible to you? How did your relationship with the plaintiff begin? What conversations did you have with her regarding the malpractice case? Did you ever imply she would receive money? That last one made my stomach turn. No, I said firmly. Never. The lawyer slid printouts across the table, text messages between Ava and me. When did the settlement finalize? So there was money involved? Did the lawyer say anything about inheritance? So technically, wrongfully losing a parent could be considered harm? At the time, those questions had felt speculative, like Ava was trying to understand legal and emotional concepts she'd been deprived of. Seeing them now, highlighted, categorized, labeled as evidence, it made me feel sick. The lawyer asked, "Why did you answer these questions so freely?" I stared at him. Because she cried in my grandmother's house. Because she said she wasn't here for money. Because she held a pillow with my father's face on it and sobbed until her shoulders shook. Because I believed her. But all I said was, because I thought she wanted to know who her father was. June took everything the hardest. She blamed herself, relentlessly, obsessively. I invited her to Grands, she kept saying. I told her we were here for her. I let her into our family. I did this. It didn't matter how many times we told her she wasn't responsible. She couldn't hear it. She started skipping social events. She stopped painting, which she used to love. She'd stare at her phone for hours, waiting for a message from Ava that would never come. One night, she sat on my couch, knees pulled to her chest, and asked, "Do you think any of it was real? The crying? The stories? The emotions? Do you think she was pretending the whole time?" I didn't know. That was the worst part. I didn't know. I think she wanted something, I said. And she convinced herself that meant she deserved it. June looked at me like she didn't recognize me. You sound so cold, she whispered. I'm tired, I said. And I was bone-deep tired. Mom tried to stay strong. She tried to compartmentalize. But she was already carrying the guilt of Dad's death, the guilt of the malpractice case, the guilt of not being able to protect us from the world. Now she carried the guilt of Ava. I should have told you more about that breakup, she said late one night. I should have pushed your father harder for answers back then. I should have prepared you for this. Mom, I said, none of this is your fault. But she didn't believe me. She started sleeping less, eating less, forgetting things, losing weight. She'd go quiet for long stretches of time, staring into space like she was mapping alternate universes where this hadn't happened. I'd catch her standing by the window, hands clasped, eyes unfocused. She's not my daughter, Mom whispered once. But I still feel responsible for her. That shattered me. Another thing I hadn't considered. Lawsuits become public records, which meant coworkers found out, extended family found out, neighbors found out, old acquaintances found out. People started whispering. Some muttered that money changed people. Others asked uncomfortable questions. Some even suggested that maybe we should share the settlement. One person, a cousin we barely speak to, actually said, "Well, if she's his daughter, she's entitled, right?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I stopped attending family gatherings entirely. I wish I could describe that year in clean narrative terms, but the truth is, it was chaos. Messy. Non-linear. A slow bleed. A year of panic attacks, therapy appointments, unanswered questions, resentment numbness, too many emails from lawyers, too many nights staring at the ceiling, too many what-ifs. We lost trust in others. We lost trust in ourselves. We lost trust in our memories. Because Ava wasn't just suing us for money. She was reframing our father in legal language. She was reframing our relationship with her as if we owed her something. She was reframing her own intentions as pure and ours as selfish. It twisted everything. I started replaying every moment with her, but now through the lens of betrayal. The cafe hug. The tears in Gran's house. The questions about dates. The long pauses before she asked something important. The careful way she always phrased things. The disappearances right before key legal steps. I started wondering, did she see us as family? Or did she see us as a legal opportunity? Was it both? Was it neither? I didn't know. I still don't. One day, Andrew called us into his office. "A ruling is likely going to favor you," he said. "Her claim was filed too late. Legally, this will resolve in your favor." Mom exhaled shakily, like she'd been submerged underwater, and finally breached the surface. June cried, not out of relief, but out of exhaustion. I sat there silently, because the legal war was ending. But our emotional war wasn't. Even then, I knew. No matter how this ended in court, nothing would go back to the way it was. Ava had stepped into our lives during a moment of vulnerability, and whether intentionally or not, she used our grief as a foothold. We would survive the lawsuit. But something in us had already died. The end of the lawsuit should have felt like a victory. After a year of suffocating uncertainty, sleepless nights, legal bills, emotional whiplash, and questioning our own memories, we finally heard the words. The claim was filed too late after Mr. Delaney's death. The case is resolved in your favor. Just like that. A whole year of torment, over in a single sentence. But relief didn't wash over me the way I thought it would. There was no triumphant exhale, no collapsing into tears, no sudden lightness. Instead, what I felt was hollow. Completely, painfully hollow. Like someone had scooped out the part of me that used to feel joy and left only a quiet, echoing emptiness in its place. Mom sat stiffly in her chair when Andrew gave us the news. She nodded, thanked him, and stared at the table for so long that I wasn't sure she was breathing. June cried, softly, tiredly, but even her crying sounded depleted, like she didn't have the strength to cry the way she needed to. Andrew looked at us with a sympathy that didn't feel patronizing. He'd seen this before. Maybe he saw it too often. "I know it doesn't feel like justice," he said gently. "Cases like this rarely do." He was right. Justice wasn't the word for it. Closure wasn't the word for it. Winning wasn't the word for it. The only word that fit was after. We were in the after now. But the before had been burned down. When we left the office, no one spoke on the drive home. June stared out the window red-eyed. Mom clasped her hands like she was praying for something, even though the thing she had prayed for had technically already happened. As for me, I felt like I was floating through someone else's story. I should have been relieved. I should have been grateful. I should have felt vindicated. But all I could think was, Ava did this to us. And I let her. Because I welcomed her in. I invited her to Gran's house. I cried with her. I answered her questions. I opened doors that I should have kept locked. I didn't cause her choices. I know that. But I gave her the access she needed to justify them. That guilt clung to me. In the weeks after the ruling, Mom became quieter than I had ever seen her. She wasn't angry, not outwardly. She wasn't ranting about betrayal or calling Ava names. Instead, she carried this deep, pounding sorrow that was somehow heavier than anger. She stopped gardening. She stopped cooking dinner. She stopped watching her shows in the evenings. She spent hours sitting in Dad's old armchair with a blanket pulled around her shoulders, staring at nothing. Sometimes she'd hold one of Dad's old flannel shirts. Other times she'd sit with her hands folded like she was trying to hold her heart together. One night I gently asked, "Mom, what are you thinking about?" She hesitated, then whispered, "How do I mourn my husband again for something he didn't even know he caused?" That wrecked me. She wasn't blaming Dad. She wasn't even angry at him. She was mourning a different version of him, the version who had a child out there and never told her. The version who had unintentionally set this entire chain reaction into motion. She cried that night in a way I had never heard before, quiet, guttural, exhausted. The kind of crying that comes from a soul that has been pressed under too much weight for too long. June didn't cry as much anymore. She got colder, harder. She built walls fast, not between us, but between herself and the world outside. She became suspicious of small talk. She second-guessed kindness from strangers. She stopped going out with her friends. One night we were sitting at my place, eating takeout in silence, when she finally said, "I don't think I'll ever trust anyone new again." She said it matter-of-factly, not dramatically, but with a steady resignation that scared me. I asked her what she meant. I let Ava into my life. I let her hug me. I let her cry on my shoulder. And while she was doing that, she was collecting information. She used me without even blinking. She set down her chopsticks. I won't let anyone close enough to do that ever again. I didn't know what to say, because part of me felt the same way. I kept pretending I was the strong one, the rational one, the one who compartmentalized, the one who understood the complexity of human motives. But I cracked too. I deleted every photo I'd taken with Ava before I realized they were the only ones I had. I blocked her number so I wouldn't accidentally look at old messages. I stopped going to the cafe where we'd first met because the memory of that first hug made my stomach twist. Worse than all that, though, was the guilt that grew like mold in the dark corners of my mind. I'd been the one who invited her to Gran's house. I'd been the one who reassured her when she apologized too much. I'd been the one who said, "You're welcome anytime." Looking back, I sometimes wondered if some part of her took that literally, if she saw every open door as permission. If she saw every hug as a sign of acceptance. If she saw every shared memory as something she should have had the right to inherit. I wondered, if I had kept more distance, would she have done this? I don't know. I will never know. And that uncertainty sits in my chest like a stone. Word spreads fast in families, especially when public records are involved. Before long, cousins, aunts, uncles, people who hadn't called us in years, were suddenly checking in. Some were sympathetic. Some were curious. Some were intrusive. Some were judgmental. One relative I barely knew had the audacity to ask, "Well, if she's his daughter, didn't she deserve part of the settlement anyway?" I didn't punch him, but I wanted to. Mom overheard him and walked away before she burst into tears. After that, I stopped attending family gatherings. June stopped answering group chats. Mom blocked half of her cousins. Word about money changes people. Even distant family. Even people who have no claim, no context, no right. Winning the case didn't undo any of the damage. Instead, it cemented it. Now there was a legal record stating that Ava had tried to claim part of the settlement. That she had tried to argue emotional harm from the loss of a man she never even knew. That she positioned herself as a victim in a story we had lived painfully, wrenchingly, personally. And now, no matter what, there would always be a drought of trust between us and the world. I remember standing in my living room one night, staring at Dad's old watch, the one he wore every day, and thinking, he would have hated this. He would have been devastated. And then another thought came. But he also might have loved her. He might have wanted to know her. That contradiction tore me apart. Because Dad wasn't just ours. He wasn't just who we remembered him to be. He was a whole person, with mistakes and regrets and choices we'll never understand fully. And Ava was part of that story, whether we wanted her to be or not. After the legal dust settled, there was a stretch of time where everything felt muted, like someone had turned the volume down on life. I'd go grocery shopping and catch myself staring at labels without processing them. June accidentally left the stove on twice. Mom kept losing her keys. We were all functioning, technically, but none of us were living. That was the true cost of Ava's lawsuit. Not the legal fees. Not the stress. Not the invasion of privacy. Not even the betrayal. The real cost was the way it stole our sense of safety. Our sense of family. Our belief in the stability of the world. The Delaney family had survived one catastrophe, Dad's sudden death. We had survived the malpractice case. But this was different. This was an earthquake that left everything standing but nothing stable. About a month after the settlement, I made the mistake of looking her up on social media. Her profile was mostly private, but I saw enough to feel sick. She looked hollow, thin, pale. Her captions were vague and sad. One post said, "Some truths destroy you. Others fix you. I'm still figuring out which one this is." Another said, "Nothing prepares you for finding a family you'll never belong to." She wasn't gloating. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't even defensive. She looked lost. And that made everything worse. Because I didn't want to pity her. I didn't want to feel anything for her at all. But I did. Some part of me, some stupid, soft part, kept remembering her crying in Gran's house, holding that pillow whispering, "I feel like I miss him." That was the Ava I thought I knew. Not the one who filed the lawsuit. Not the one who destroyed us. The problem is, both versions existed. And I had no idea which one was real. 6 months after the settlement, nothing happened. No messages. No sightings. No updates. Just silence. And then, 6 months later, she reached out again. But that part comes next. 6 months. That's how long it had been since the lawsuit ended. Long enough for the paperwork to be filed, the attorneys to move on, the court records to be archived. Long enough that everyone around us assumed we were over it. We weren't. You don't get over something like that. You learn to operate around the wound, not through it. Mom had slowly regained color in her face. June started painting again, dark pieces, but still painting. I went back to functioning like a person instead of a bundle of exposed nerves. We were not healed, but we were knitting ourselves back together, thread by thin thread. Then Ava messaged me. Of course she did. Of course she waited until we had just barely learned how to breathe again. It was a Tuesday morning. I was brushing my teeth before work when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hi Claire. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm hoping you'll read this. I think there were misunderstandings. I would like a chance to talk when you're ready." I dropped my toothbrush into the sink. My heart went cold, then hot, then cold again. I reread the message 3 times. Same number prefix as before, but new number. She must have changed phones. Maybe changed her whole life, who knows. I sat on the edge of my bathtub, staring at the message until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. Not right away. Not at all, actually. I told myself I needed time to think. But really, I was frozen. I didn't tell Mom right away. Didn't tell June. I held that message like it was a live wire. Dangerous to touch, dangerous to ignore. But I couldn't hide something like that forever. That night, after dinner at Mom's, I said casually, too casually apparently, "Ava messaged me today." Mom's fork clattered against her plate. June inhaled sharply like someone had grabbed her throat. "What?" Mom whispered. "What?" June said louder. I handed them my phone. Mom read it once. June snatched the phone and read it 3 times in quick succession. Then June said the thing I'd been thinking and trying to shove down. "What misunderstandings?" "She sued us." Mom spoke more quietly, but with a tremor that scared me. What could she possibly want to talk about now? None of us had an answer. Yes, I brought the message to therapy. Of course I did. It felt like a test I didn't know how to pass. My therapist stared at the screen for a long moment before speaking. "Do you feel obligated to respond?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what I feel. Part of me wants to scream at her. Part of me wants to block her. And part of me," I swallowed hard, Part of me wants to ask her why she did this. My therapist nodded slowly. That's not closure, she said. That's curiosity mixed with pain. Sometimes those feel similar. She leaned forward. You do not owe Ava a response. But you also don't need to punish yourself for wanting to understand. I left that session feeling even more tangled than before. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about Ava. Not the Ava who filed the lawsuit. Not the Ava who weaponized my grief to build a legal narrative. Not the Ava who disappeared when things got difficult. But the Ava who cried in Gran's house. The Ava who touched Dad's face on a photo like it meant something. The Ava who held that pillow and whispered, "He looks like someone I could have loved." Was that Ava real? Or was she part of the act? Was she grieving a father she never had, or was she rehearsing? I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever know. And the worst part? Sometimes I miss the version of her who felt like a promise instead of a threat. I wish I hadn't done it. But curiosity is a cruel thing. Ava's profile was still sparse, still private, but she'd posted one new thing. A picture of a sky, cloudy, gray, streaked with light. The caption: I wish people understood that intentions aren't always the same as impact. I slammed my laptop shut, because I knew exactly who she meant. And I hated that I understood that sentence too deeply for my own comfort. A few days after I told them about the message, Mom pulled me aside while June was in the bathroom. Her voice shook when she said this. I don't want you talking to her alone. Mom. No, she said firmly. I'm serious. Claire, she hurt us. She hurt you. I couldn't bear it if she hurt you again. I hugged her. She hugged me tighter than she has in years. That hug said everything I needed to know about how deeply this wound still runs. June reacted differently. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She got angry. A cold, razor-sharp anger I barely recognized. She doesn't get to do this, she spat. She doesn't get to blow up our lives and then walk back in like she deserves a conversation. No. No. I asked her quietly, what if she regrets it? June's face twisted. If she regretted it, she wouldn't have done it. I didn't argue. I couldn't. Because part of me agreed. I kept rereading that message. I think there were misunderstandings. What does that even mean? What misunderstanding can possibly explain? Filing a year-long lawsuit for money from our father's death after crying in our family's arms, after promising she wanted nothing from us, after disappearing the moment legal strategy mattered, after using our conversations as evidence. What misunderstanding covers all of that? And yet, I still haven't blocked her. I still haven't replied. I still haven't deleted the message. Because some small, wounded part of me, the part she touched when she cried for the father she never knew, wants an explanation. But another part of me, the part that spent a year watching Mom collapse, watching June unravel, watching myself turn into someone suspicious and brittle, wants her to disappear forever. So I'm stuck. I'm stuck between anger and grief, curiosity and fear, compassion and self-protection. I'm stuck between the sister she might have been and the stranger she became. If I could sit across from her, not in a courtroom, not through attorneys, not through screens, and ask just one question, it would be this. When did you decide to sue us? Was it before she met us? After? During? Was it a lawyer who convinced her? Was it desperation? Was it calculation? Was it grief? Was it entitlement? Was it loneliness? Or was it something simpler, something more painful? Was it the moment she realized our dad had died before she ever had the chance to know him? Would that explain it? Would that justify it? I don't know. Sometimes I imagine replying, not with forgiveness, not with anger, just with the truth. I don't know who you are anymore. Because that's the real wound. Not the money, not the lawsuit, not the betrayal. It's that I'm still trying to reconcile two versions of her. The Ava who sobbed in my grandmother's house and the Ava who spent a year trying to take something born out of our grief. I don't know which one was real. Maybe both were. Maybe neither. And until I know, I can't open that door again. Staring at a message from the woman who might be my sister. The woman who sued me. The woman who shattered my family. The woman who might genuinely want to fix things. The woman who might only want to justify herself. The woman who might hurt us again. The woman who might be hurting herself. I haven't replied. I don't know if I ever will. So my question is this. Is it heartless to refuse to talk to someone who used the law to tear your family apart? Or is it finally choosing self-protection after a lifetime of trying to be the bigger person? I don't know. But I'm terrified that whatever I choose, I'll regret it.